Thank you so much for joining us on News from the Heart. I'm Heather George, and I'm sitting with my teacher, my guru, Swami Chetanananda, who has been so generous in offering for us to extract his thoughts and opinions on various subjects. And today, and this month in particular, in not only this country, but in this state, I think pretty significant milestone has happened. Cannabis become legal to all adults in the state of Oregon. You no longer need a medicinal license to purchase it or grow it.
Also, recreational marijuana is completely legal, and I think it's just legal, period.
Right.
I think you can grow it, you can smoke it, you can eat it, you can do whatever you want with it. It's not an issue anymore.
For the most part, there are some regulations.
They want to get paid for it, for letting us do it.
Yeah, so it's something that I've had a personal interest in growing up with rheumatoid arthritis, and earlier than many, maybe starting to learn the medicinal properties of it, and definitely getting criticized for my theories at one time, and now so much is getting validated, and research that has been suppressed for decades is now going to have a chance to shine. But I wanted to get your opinions.
I think another very interesting event is just today it was announced that the state of Texas, that the bipartisan committee on the topic of legalizing marijuana pushed the bill along unanimously, and it looks to me like Texas is going to become a place for legal marijuana before California is, which is like so strange, but not. In any case.
Yeah, it's progress.
I don't know if it's progress. The thing about it is, it's clearly a topic that transcends the issue of politics. Everybody, on either side of the political divide wants to get high. So that's interesting. But I'd like to start out by my own comments by saying the first part of it is that at the turn of the 19th century, when the United States was just founded, everybody was being encouraged to grow hemp. And in fact, there was some regulation about, for however much land you had to, and especially if you got it on certain kinds of government grants, you had to commit to growing hemp in a certain part of it. And so it wasn't just legal, it was a requirement because it was a principal fiber that was used in the creation of cloth and rope and paper. But it was completely legal until the cotton farmers wanted to eliminate the competition. And that was the beginning of the push. And when marijuana finally became completely illegal and was being demonized in, the entertainment world, what was that movie they did about marijuana that we all were, used to go and get high and go laugh at when we were in college? I can't
Reefer
remember.
Madness.
Reefer Madness, thank you. Yeah, so anyway, that was a product of, the cotton industry and DuPont, who at that time had just invented nylon. And so there was the beginnings of a whole new kind of cloth and fiber industry, which, did not want to be competed with by a fiber which was superior to their own and cheaper to create. And that's hemp. And so it was really never, the abolition of marijuana was never ever about the evils of getting high. It was only about, the usual corporate, desire for profit and greed. And, these people didn't really care at all who they stepped on. In the days before marijuana was made illegal and demonized, everybody was getting high. It was nothing. It was just what people did. Then suddenly it became illegal, and so in the last, especially since 1970 or 73 really, when there was this enormous push to expand the prison population in the United States, once again, most likely for profit and greed, so many lives since then have been destroyed because of the illegalization of marijuana, which has really nothing to do with the evils of marijuana and only to do with the profits of the cotton industry and synthetic fiber people. This is really kind of shameful.
Oh, that's an understatement. And the utilitarian purposes of hemp, and the Nixon had studies commissioned on the dangers of marijuana in the early 70s. The studies came back and showed to the contrary. Not only did they find it wasn't dangerous, but potentially beneficial for, in particular, some particular cancers they were studying. And he had that study shut down, destroyed, and less than 2 years later it was made a Class 1 felony drug.
Yeah, well, and the other thing was the paper industry was also very opposed to hemp because, you can produce about, the number is ridiculous, 25 times the amount of paper per hemp acre that you can per timber acre. I think that the legalization, so first of all, marijuana. I don't think anything is all good, and I don't think there's nothing that's all bad. And marijuana can be for some people at some point in their life. I definitely did it myself.
You inhaled?
Absolutely. And, it never rang my bell. I thought it was interesting and not compelling. And I had come from a personal background where my parents were big smokers, and I hated smoking. And so I really didn't like it. But some people have been very beneficially affected by it, and especially people who've come from really constrained backgrounds have had their worldview, their brains completely opened up by the experiences that they had with marijuana. And I think that's a wonderful thing. The issue for me I'm not a big fan of marijuana, and my concern for it is particularly relative to my own spiritual practice and other people's spiritual practice. My concern is that the price that you pay for the relaxation that you get is a depreciation in your ability to concentrate and to focus. And further, for some people who are extremely sensitive to cannabis, I have seen serious cases, like serious psychotic separations in people who are really sensitive to it. So it's not anything that is all good, but it's certainly not bad. And if it rings your bell, well, carry on. Far be it from me to say don't do it. But I will say, if you have the intention to carry on some kind of, if you have the intention to practice and grow spiritually, which I think, frankly, is the only reason why anybody is alive in this world anyway, then you have to really be thoughtful about your use of marijuana. So moving along from that topic, the political issue is very, I feel fantastically good. Who would have imagined in my lifetime marijuana would be legal? But I feel fantastically good about it because it's like, it should have never been that anybody ever went to jail for marijuana, ever. That was wrong. And furthermore, you know, it should have never been, marijuana should never have been illegal, because look at what it's done to Mexico. It has destroyed that country completely. It has created a country that is the largest drug dealing country in the world, even exceeding Afghanistan. At least Afghanistan's Islamic sensibility slows down the intensity of poppy cultivation going on in that part of the world. The Christian sensibility that is prevalent in Mexico has somehow supported that country in becoming, you know, the major drug supplier to the United States, and in the process turned it into a completely failed state. The next thing is marijuana has, you know, the legalization of marijuana, which has been talked about by some of us anyway since the 70s. The legalization of marijuana has been resisted in this country by wealthy people who are investors in the drug trade, who are making enormous untaxed profits from the whole endeavor. And particularly what we see in California, which is the largest marijuana producing state in the universe. You know, what we see is a big resistance to legalizing it by politicians. You know, there is a level of political corruption associated with the criminalization of marijuana, which I will be thrilled to see flushed down the toilet where it belongs. You know, it is known to everybody since 1933 that prohibition is impossible. This is a known thing. And the reason why prohibition finally went by the wayside is because the federal government was broke after it prohibited it and wasn't getting the tax anymore. And they were really broke, and they needed to reinstitute legalized alcohol in order to start to be solvent again. And the whole move really in the United States will happen because politicians finally realize not only are they, you know, overstuffing their budgets, you know, with prison population, you know, they're overtaxing their budgets, from their prison populations. California's prisons cost the state something like $10 billion a year. It's ridiculous. And basically, they are absolutely inhuman. The only thing the prisons do is create more criminals and harden people's hearts to, you know, themselves and all of the rest of humanity. It is a cruelty and an abomination. It has nothing to do with justice or protecting anybody.
Is there a bill right now Obama's working on to get all non-violent drug-related prisoners out?
There is a pardon that, you know, we saw on the news Obama is considering for how many drug-related nonviolent felons, I don't know, but supposedly this is a consideration. I haven't seen that it is a definite decision yet.
Yeah.
I hope it happens. I think the whole criminalization of marijuana and mass incarceration, you know, of mostly African-American men under 25. But a bunch of white guys too. For absolutely no good reason except to give the federal government and state and local people more money to hire more police, to, you know, be supplied with more guns and ammo and uniforms and cars and by, you know, the friends of the national politicians. The whole deal is just shameful. So, then moving on to the topic of medical marijuana, it's really interesting. There's a lot of course, you know, there is the, right now in the early stages of this, there's the big push to proclaim it a wonder drug and that it cures everything. Well, I don't know. Maybe, but I do have some personal experience in cannabis oil in the treatment of brain tumors. And it seems to me, I now haven't seen a lot of cases, I've seen 4. And in each of those 4 cases that I've seen, you know, the person seems to be benefiting. I mean, first of all 4 of them are alive. Now, it's true that all 4 of these people are also being treated with homeopathy. But it seems like, at least, cannabis oil has some, you know, constraining effect on the growth of tumors, which I think is a very positive development that needs to be seriously explored. Now, there are other benefits that people are beginning to research with marijuana, and you know, I think how wonderful. I mean, anything that is not an artificially created, you know, molecule, a drug from the drug companies, is a wonderful thing, I think.
They've named one of the molecules that they're finding beneficial in marijuana anandamide.
How wonderful. Bliss. But, you know, my concern is that at the end of the day, what's going to happen is that you're going to see the tobacco companies and the drug companies, you know, invade the recreational and medical marijuana industry and essentially make a big effort to try to control it. And, you know, what they will try to do is totally constrain an individual's right to grow, and, you know, and they will totally constrain any organization's right to manufacture, and then they will dominate. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if that happened. Hopefully, in places like Oregon, where you have a very high level of educated population in the state and in the most populous areas of the state, you'll see that whole move resisted. I really hope so. So it's, you know, it's the the home and garden section of the Oregonian yesterday was an article about how to grow weed.
Yeah, I think the law went into effect on the 6th, and on the 11th an article comes out in Home and Garden.
How could that, growing up, we could have never imagined. You know, the weed was like so cutting edge when we were young, and now it's just the most ordinary thing in the world. Well, I'm glad that we've gotten law enforcement and the federales' nose out of our business, and I can only hope that the rest of the states will move rapidly to legalize marijuana, helping them to deal with all of their budgetary issues, which are massive. And I hope that we will begin to make serious and sincere, honorable and moral efforts to help Mexico, you know, shed its violent, torn present and transform itself into, you know, the wonderful country I think it could potentially be. You know, as I said last week, you know, I despise what Donald Trump had said about Mexican Americans and Mexicans in general, because I think they are, in general, one of the finest groups of people I've ever encountered in my life. So, and that most of these fine and gentle people have to live in this astonishing violence is just, you know, overwhelmingly sad.
Thank you for joining us from here.
And isn't it wonderful that we had something positive to say this week? Because mostly, you know, I'm complaining about something or another, but there's also a lot to complain about.
Yeah, good things from News from the Heart happen too.
Amen.